This is a fictional story inspired by real systemic issues documented in public research. All characters, institutions, locations, and events are entirely invented. Any resemblance to real persons or organizations is coincidental. The first sign that Graham Dodd had decided to bury Imani Vale's approval packet was not his voice, it was the color on the screen. Green. Ready for release. Imani saw it reflected in the glass for less than 1 second before Renee Park moved her hand over the monitor like she was covering a wound. Her file was complete. Her appointment was valid. The state filing window closed in 21 minutes. And inside the copper folder beneath her palms were 3 documents that could prove this office had been delaying people like her for months. Graham stepped behind Renee with a coffee mug in one hand and county authority clipped to his jacket. "Hold release," he said. Renee's fingers stopped on the drawer key. "It is marked ready," she whispered. "I said, hold release." That was all it took. No missing form, no failed signature, no written rule. Just one supervisor standing behind a glass counter, turning a completed file into a problem, because he believed the woman in front of him had no power to make him explain why. The green band around her name changed to amber, then red. Manual administrative freeze. The word manual sat on the screen like a fingerprint, not automated, not risk-based, not the system, him. Behind Imani, the lobby went quiet in the way public rooms go quiet when everyone sees something wrong and everyone is afraid of becoming next. A man in paint-stained boots looked down at his shoes. A grandmother tightened her hand around a paper bag of prescriptions. Near the far chairs, Keisha Monroe held a white envelope against her chest and watched the same counter that was about to decide whether she could work her overnight care shift. The badge scanner behind the glass beeped. Approved. Someone else's packet moved through. Then another. Approved. Approved. Imani stayed frozen. Graham looked at her with the calm face of a man who had learned how to hurt people without sounding cruel. "Your clearance is now under Enhanced Integrity Review 7, he said. "This office will not release your approval packet today, 21 minutes before the deadline. 84 trainees waiting on that certification. A community hall full of families preparing for a launch she might now miss. And her father, sitting in a rehabilitation center with his blue tie on, waiting for the birthday dinner she had promised she would not be late to." Imani kept her hands flat on the copper folder. "Please show me the written policy," she said. Graham blinked once. Applicants complained. Applicants begged. Applicants threatened to call someone. They did not usually ask for the rule. "The policy is internal," he said. "Then identify the missing document. There are profile irregularities. Name one." He turned the monitor slightly away from her. That was his second mistake. The glass still showed the reflection. Manual elevation, supervisor code, G. Dodd. Timestamp, 4:01 in the afternoon. Renee saw Imani read it. Then she lowered her eyes. That silence hurt more than Graham's lie. Because Graham was doing what gatekeepers do when nobody makes them write it down. But Renee had seen the file before he touched it. She had seen it green. She had seen it ready. She had seen the door open, then watched him close it with 2 clicks. Behind Imani, Keisha stepped to counter 2. "I uploaded the renewal form," Keisha said. "I paid the fee. I brought the letter they asked for." The clerk barely opened her envelope. "Household Stability Advisory," he said. "Secondary review." "How long?" 10 business days. Keisha's face changed, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for every working person in that room to understand what 10 business days meant. "My client needs overnight care tonight," Keisha said. "If this letter does not print by 6, my status goes inactive." Graham did not even turn his head. That was when Imani understood the machine was not only pointed at her, it was already reaching for the next woman. One screen. One label, one delay dressed up as procedure, address integrity, profile concern, internal guidance, temporary hold, words clean enough to survive a memo and dirty enough to wreck a life. Graham lifted his hand toward security. "Ma'am," he said, "this is your final opportunity to step aside voluntarily." Imani looked at the clock. 4:15 in the afternoon, 15 minutes left. Her phone vibrated in her coat pocket. One message from her operations lead. "State portal closes soon. Do we file without county packet?" One from the community hall. "Families are seated early. Are we still on?" One from Briarhouse Rehabilitation. "Your father asked if you are bringing the blue tie. He is dressed." For 1 second, Imani's hand tightened on the folder so hard the edge cut a pale line across her skin. Graham saw it and mistook pain for surrender. "You may appeal after review," he said. Imani looked at Keisha's unopened envelope. She looked at Renee's shaking hands. She looked at the red freeze band beside her name. Then she remembered what her father taught her when she was 11 years old, standing beside him at a benefits counter while a clerk tried to turn his paperwork into humiliation. The paper needs to leave cleaner than the anger. So she did not shout, she did not cry, she did not step aside, she slid the copper folder forward. "Before you add one more false note to that file," she said, "you should preserve today's access logs." Graham gave a small laugh. "Preserve them for whom?" Imani opened the folder. The first page carried the state seal. The second carried the board's conditional authority notice. The third carried the audit summary showing that Marlow County had been manually delaying release-ready files from South Lark and East Barrow at nearly 4 times the rate of other districts. Graham's hand froze halfway to the phone. Renee stopped breathing. Keisha held her envelope tighter. And for the first time that afternoon, the man behind the glass understood that the applicant he had marked as a risk was the examiner sent to investigate the risk process itself. The badge scanner beeped again. Approved. But this time, nobody in the lobby mistook the sound for fairness. 8 months earlier, Imani Vale sat in the back room of South Lark Care Academy with the copper folder under her left elbow, while the ceiling fan clicked above a stack of unpaid invoices and the smell of burnt coffee settled into the walls. The academy occupied the second floor of a converted appliance store on Barrow Street in the fictional city of Larkhaven. The sign outside still showed the pale outline of old refrigerator letters when the afternoon sun hit it. Downstairs, a discount mattress shop played radio advertisements through a speaker that buzzed on high notes. Upstairs, Imani taught certification classes to people who already knew how to care for others, but needed a system to acknowledge what their hands had been doing for years. Her public voice was calm. Students heard it when she explained patient lifting rules, infection logs, medication reminders, and how to document a fall without blaming the person who fell. Funders heard it when she described workforce shortages with clean charts and careful phrasing. City staff heard it when she thanked them for extensions they should not have made necessary. Her private numbers were not calm. The rent was $3,600 behind. The payroll reserve could cover 9 employees for 11 days. The training mannequins had been repaired 4 times because new ones cost more than the winter heating bill. The academy had graduated 186 caregivers in 3 years, but 27 were still waiting on credentialing delays from Marlow County. The landlord had given her 12 weeks of patience and one final envelope. She opened that envelope at 2 a.m. after teaching an evening class, cleaning the restroom herself, and driving a student home because the last bus had left early. The letter was polite. Every sentence wore a clean shirt. Payment required. Lease remedies reserved. No further extensions guaranteed. She read it twice, then folded it into the copper folder beside a bank notice, a grant timeline, and a photograph of her father standing outside the old academy door the day she signed the lease. In the picture, Otis Vale wore a brown cap and a work jacket with his name stitched above the pocket. He had brought a thermos of tea and a roll of painter's tape. He did not make speeches. He taped the first paper sign to the glass and pressed the corners flat with both thumbs. The hidden project began as a practical answer to a practical injury. Too many elders in South Lark were waiting for care workers. Too many trained workers were waiting for credentials. Too many credentials were waiting behind small, unexplained holds that always seemed to attach themselves to the same zip codes, the same last names, the same apartment addresses, the same people who could not afford to keep returning to a lobby during business hours. Imani called the project Harbor Ladder because her father used to say a good ladder did not lift anyone by magic. It simply gave a person a safe place to put the next foot. Harbor Ladder was supposed to connect home care trainees, elder support agencies, and neighborhood clinics through one shared credentialing pipeline. The academy had recruited 42 trainees for the first cohort. 31 were women. 9 were men. 2 identified differently and had asked Imani whether the forms would make them choose a box that did not hold them. 16 were parents. 7 were caring for elders at home. 4 had prior denials they could not explain because the office had never given them written reasons. The funding looked solid on paper. A community health foundation pledged $600,000. A local hospital network promised placement interviews for every graduate. A workforce partnership offered transportation cards, exam fee vouchers, and a small emergency fund for students who missed wages to attend class. The state would release the larger match only after Marlow County Credentialing certified the Academy's updated training site and signed the Access Compliance Attachment. That attachment was supposed to be routine. Routine became 8 months of returned emails, missing attachments, duplicate requests, canceled appointments, and one memorable call where an intake clerk told Imani that community-based applicants often misunderstood documentation standards. She asked which standard. The clerk said the office could not provide legal advice. Imani did not yell. She created a spreadsheet. She logged dates, names, windows, delays, phrases, missing forms, restored forms, and which applicants moved smoothly after arriving with lawyers, employer letters, or addresses from wealthier districts. She marked every unexplained pause. She saved every envelope. She asked her trainees for permission before adding their experiences. She never wrote race in a column where a pattern could be dismissed as accusation. She wrote what the office wrote. Address pending. Identity escalation. Funding source review. Integrity hold. Applicant did not respond, even when the applicant had replied 3 times. By the 5th month, the spreadsheet had become something larger than a complaint. It had become a map of a door that opened differently depending on who stood before it. That was when the Marlow State Care Board contacted her. The board had received separate complaints from legal aid, a union clinic, 2 elder agencies, and a council member who refused to put anything in writing after the first call. The board needed someone who understood credentialing, training pipelines, and the lived cost of delay. They could not appoint a political figure. They did not want a consultant who would spend 6 weeks learning the words people at the counter already knew. They asked Imani to serve as a special compliance examiner for a limited review of Marlow County Credentialing's access practices. Limited was the word that mattered. The appointment did not let her fire a supervisor. It did not let her rewrite state rules. It did not let her approve her own packet without documentation. It gave her authority to inspect records, preserve access logs, trigger a board hearing, and recommend emergency corrective action if the office used unauthorized policy language to block eligible applicants. The authority was real, but it had edges. Imani respected edges. Edges kept power from becoming the thing it claimed to fight. She could have sent a lawyer to collect the academy packet. She could have asked the board to issue a formal notice before she ever entered the lobby. She could have protected Harbor Ladder first and left the larger review for another day. Some people would have called that wisdom. Some would have called it survival. But the complaints had a common shape. Applicants said the words changed when they asked questions. Holds appeared after supervisors looked at them. Ready packets became pending packets. Clerks lowered their voices. Written policies turned into internal guidance. Nobody ever denied them. The office simply made access drift out of reach. Imani needed to know whether the machine failed only on paper or whether it failed in the room. So she went herself, not as a threat, not as a trap, as an applicant with a ready packet, a valid appointment, and a right to be served under the same rule as anyone else. The numbers were simple and brutal. The professional clock closed at 4:30 in the afternoon. If the certification packet was not filed by then, the state match rolled to the next review cycle. 60 days would vanish. 84 trainees would wait. 12 elder care placements would remain unfilled. The academy would owe rent before the first reimbursement arrived. Harbor Ladder might survive on paper and still fail in the lives it was built to reach. The public clock was set for 5:20 at New Dawn Community Hall. 40 families had arranged rides. 3 neighborhood clinic directors had cleared their calendars. A local education reporter had agreed to cover the launch because workforce stories rarely received attention unless someone had already been hurt. The foundation president was bringing the ceremonial first check, not because ceremony mattered to Imani, but because trust did. If she arrived without the certification packet, the room would see another promise made to South Lark before the paperwork disappeared. The personal clock was 6:10. Her father was waiting at Briar House Rehabilitation for his birthday dinner. It was his first birthday since the stroke that slowed his left hand and stole part of his laugh before therapy helped him find some of it again. Imani had promised peach pie from the bakery he liked, the blue tie he wore only when he said a day deserved respect, and 40 quiet minutes without a phone on the table. If she missed it, he would smile anyway. He would say, "Handle your business, baby." He would mean it. Then he would look toward the door each time a cart rolled past because Hope had habits pride could not erase. That was the part no grant timeline showed. At 4:16 in the afternoon, back inside Marlow County credentialing, the copper folder lay under Imani's hands while Graham Dodd waited for her to step aside. 14 minutes until the filing window closed. The badge scanner beeped for someone else. Approved. Imani felt the cracked leather of her father's watch against her wrist and looked at Renee Park, who still had not spoken. Then Graham said, "Ma'am, this is your final opportunity to sit down voluntarily." Imani did not move. When Imani Vale was 11 years old, on the first cold Thursday of November, she stood beside her father in the lobby of the East Fenwick Municipal Benefits Annex and watched a clerk misplace his dignity without ever touching him. The building was a single-story rectangle of beige brick with a flat roof and windows too high for a child to see through. It smelled of wet coats, floor wax, and old paper that had spent too many winters near a radiator. A vending machine hummed beside the intake desk. Every few minutes, it clicked as if considering whether to keep working. Otis Vale had come straight from the distribution yard. He wore his blue postal jacket with the reflective stripe across the chest, black work pants stamp at the cuffs, and the brown cap he always removed indoors even when nobody else bothered. His left shoulder sat slightly lower than his right because he had spent nearly 16 years lifting tubs of mail before sunrise. That morning, a payroll deduction had appeared on his check for a benefit correction he had already corrected twice. The deduction was not large enough to ruin them alone. That was how small institutional injuries survived. $43 from one check, $43 from another. A late fee at the pharmacy. A bus pass stretched for one more week. A decision at the grocery store between laundry detergent and the brand of soup Imani liked when she had a cold. Her mother was gone by then, not dead, not vanished, only living in another state with a new husband and a voice that became softer the farther away she got. Otis never described that as abandonment. He said people sometimes left by degrees before they left with luggage. Then he packed Imani's lunch at 5:30 each morning and wrote the date on every bill before placing it in a shoebox under the sink. That day, he brought the shoebox. The clerk at window 2 did not ask his name at first. She looked at his jacket, then at the box, then at the line behind him. "You need to take a number," she said. "I did," Otis answered. He held up the paper slip. She looked at it as if the paper had made an accusation. "This window handles scheduled corrections only. My correction is scheduled. Do you have the notice?" Otis opened the shoebox and pulled out a cream-colored letter, folded once, with the appointment date circled in blue ink. Imani remembered the blue because her father never used red. Red made people feel accused, he said. Blue made them read. The clerk took the letter, scanned it, and sighed. "This is a duplicate inquiry. It is the third deduction for the same item," Otis said. "The system shows unresolved." "Then the system is behind the paperwork." The clerk leaned back and raised her voice just enough for the line to hear. "Sir, I cannot adjust your account because you brought a box." Imani felt heat crawl up her neck. She wanted her father to snap back. She wanted him to say he was tired, that he had arrived before sunrise at a job that moved other people's letters through rain, holidays, and broken machines. She wanted him to say $43 mattered when a child needed shoes. She wanted him to make the room understand. Otis did none of that. He set the shoebox on the counter, took the letter back gently, and placed 3 papers side by side: the original notice, the corrected form, the payroll statement after the correction. He did not push them toward her. He aligned them so the dates faced up. "Please write down the reason you cannot process this today," he said. The clerk frowned. "I already explained. I am asking for it in writing. That is not necessary." "It is necessary to me." Behind them, someone in line muttered that some people always wanted special treatment. Imani turned, but her father's hand settled lightly on her shoulder, not gripping, not warning, resting. The weight of it said, "Do not spend yourself on someone who is already wrong." The clerk disappeared into a back office. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Imani's legs ached. Otis stood with his hands folded over the shoebox, breathing through his nose. When the clerk returned, she had another woman with her. The second woman wore a badge on a navy lanyard and smelled faintly of peppermint gum. "There was an entry error," the second woman said. Otis nodded once. "The deduction will be reversed next cycle. Please stamp my copy." The first clerk looked offended. The second woman stamped the papers. Otis gathered everything slowly. Outside, under the gray light of the parking lot, Imani finally asked why he had not told them off. He unlocked the car door, put the shoebox on the back seat, and rubbed his left shoulder before answering. "Because the paper needed to leave cleaner than my anger." That was all he said, not a speech, not a rule for life, just a tired man in a wet jacket making sure the proof survived the insult. Years later, Imani would remember the exact sound of that stamp hitting paper. She would remember the vending machine hum, the clerk's sigh, the stranger's mutter, the pressure of her father's hand on her shoulder. She would remember that he did not surrender his anger, he stored it where it could become useful. That was the lesson standing at counter 4 inside Marlow County credentialing. Not politeness, not patience, not respectability performed for people who would never be satisfied. Discipline. The kind of discipline that kept evidence intact. The kind that made a person ask for written reasons while someone else tried to turn humiliation into a room's entertainment. And this was the day that lesson stopped being memory and became a test. That afternoon had not begun with confrontation. 3:48 in the afternoon, 42 minutes until the state filing window closed. Imani entered Marlow County credentialing through a revolving door that moved too slowly for the people trapped in it. A security camera watched from the upper left corner. The lobby smelled like toner, hand sanitizer, and rainwater carried in on shoes. The floor tiles were a dull white with gray seams, and every seam seemed to lead to one of the counters behind the glass. The access badge scanner sat beside the inner staff door, black and square, with a small green light that flashed each time an employee crossed from public space into the authority side of the room. Beep, green, accepted, beep, green, accepted. It sounded almost gentle until you understood what it represented. Imani wore a dark plum coat over a cream blouse, flat black shoes, and small gold earrings her father had bought from a pawn shop window when she finished graduate school. In her right hand, she carried the copper folder. In her left, she held the appointment notice. Her father's watch sat against her wrist, the cracked leather band hidden under her sleeve unless she moved too quickly. She took number 86 from the machine. The machine printed the slip with a tired scrape. A man with a contractor badge glanced at her folder, then back at the screen. A mother bounced a baby against her shoulder. Two older men argued softly about whether counter 1 moved faster than counter 3. Near the far wall, Keisha Monroe sat with her lunchbox and her white envelope, tapping one finger against the plastic lid in a rhythm that did not match the room. Imani noticed her because the tap stopped each time the screen changed. At 3:51, number 86 appeared in blue. Renee Park called her to counter 4. Renee was in her late 30s, with a smooth bob, careful eyeliner, and the posture of someone who had trained her body to look agreeable while her mind ran ahead in warnings. Her Marlow County badge hung from a purple cord with a tiny cartoon turtle clipped above the nameplate. The turtle's shell had chipped paint. It was the only playful thing on her side of the glass. "Good afternoon," Renee said. "Appointment notice and photo identification, please." Imani slid both through the slot. Renee entered the file number. Her eyes moved left to right, then paused. "You are here for site certification release." "Yes." "South Lark Care Academy." "Yes." Renee clicked once, then again. The screen reflected faintly in the glass. Imani saw the green band before Renee covered it with a hand movement that looked casual only to someone who did not watch hands for a living. "Your packet is ready," Renee said quietly. Then her voice lowered further. "It has been ready since this morning." The badge scanner beeped behind her. Renee printed a receipt confirmation and reached for a drawer key. That was when Graham Dodd appeared. He did not rush. Men like Graham rarely rushed in rooms that already bent around their authority. He stepped from the inner hallway with a ceramic mug in one hand and a tablet in the other. He wore a gray tie, a charcoal suit jacket, and a county badge clipped exactly level with his breast pocket. His hair was trimmed close on the sides. His shoes had a shine that said he parked close to the door. Renee's shoulders changed before her face did. Graham looked at the monitor. "Hold release," he said. Renee kept her hand on the drawer key. "It is marked ready." I said, "Hold release." The word hold entered the room like a cold draft. Imani watched Renee remove her hand from the drawer. 3:54 in the afternoon. 36 minutes until the state filing window closed. Graham set his mug down where no applicant could knock it over and turned the monitor toward himself. "Ms. Vale," he said, stretching the courtesy thin, "we need to complete an additional verification step." "What step?" "Enhanced integrity review. 7. Renee looked at him. The look lasted less than a second, but Imani caught it. Recognition, fear, disagreement held behind teeth. Graham tapped the tablet. Community training sites funded through mixed sources can trigger review when their profiles present irregular exposure. The sentence had the shape of a reason. That made it more dangerous. Graham's plausible argument was not nonsense. Public certification did create risk. Training sites did receive money. Fraud existed. Agencies were responsible for protecting public funds. A credentialing office could not release every packet just because a deadline mattered to the applicant. That was the shield. The blade was in how he applied it. He did not ask for a missing document. He did not identify a failed requirement. He did not compare her packet to a written threshold. He saw South Lark, Community Academy, Foundation Pledge, State Match, Rental Address, and a black woman standing alone with no attorney beside her, and the system in his head became stricter. No slur crossed his mouth. No insult needed to. "What exact irregular exposure are you reviewing?" Imani asked. Graham smiled as if appreciating effort from a student. "Non-standard funding origin. Address inconsistency. Elevated applicant risk class. Please identify the missing item." It is not a missing item issue. Then it is not a document deficiency. It is a profile concern. Whose profile? The applicant profile. Mine or the academy's? Graham looked at Renee as if she had failed to control the counter. Both may be implicated. Renee swallowed. Imani noticed the turtle charm move against her badge. 3:57 in the afternoon. 33 minutes until the state filing window closed. At counter 2, an older man received a stamped license renewal and whispered "thank you" with both hands on the paper. At counter 1, a courier in a navy vest slid a stack of corporate clinic packets under the glass and watched a clerk stamp them without opening every page. The stamp sounded clean and repetitive. Approved. 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 Imani turned back to Graham. "Please show me the written section for Enhanced Integrity Review 7. Internal guidance. Then provide the public rule authorizing the hold." He folded his arms. "The office has discretion. Discretion under which rule?" "Standard Access Integrity Procedure." "What is the procedure number?" Graham's face remained smooth. Only his right thumb moved against the side of his tablet. "You are asking questions that do not accelerate your review." "I am preserving the basis for the review. For your own purposes, for the record." Something in his eyes sharpened. The phrase "for the record" changed the room. Applicants complained. Applicants pleaded. Applicants threatened to call someone. Fewer applicants built a record in real time. Renee lowered her gaze to the keyboard. Imani did not look away from Graham. "I need the name of the person who initiated the hold. The system initiated it." "Systems do not sign. This is not a courtroom. It is a public counter." A woman in the waiting area whispered, "Lord, she knows what to ask." Someone else shushed her. The badge scanner beeped again. Green. Accepted. 4:01 in the afternoon. 29 minutes until the state filing window closed. Graham leaned toward Renee and spoke low enough that the words almost disappeared under the lobby hum. "Move the file to amber." Renee did not type. Graham said, "Now." She moved the cursor. The green band around Imani's profile changed to amber. The color shift reflected in the glass between them. Small, silent, immense. Imani saw more than the color. She saw the drop-down field beneath it. Risk, reason. Manual elevation. She saw the user initials, G. Dodd. She saw the timestamp beside them, 4:01. She saw that the hold had not existed when Renee opened the file. Renee saw Imani seeing it. That was the first visible pattern of the day, not the whole system yet, just a thread. Then another thread appeared. On the left edge of the screen, under Q View, applicants were sorted into small categories. Some were ordinary, renewal, hospital affiliate, county vendor, professional board referral. Others carried labels that sounded neutral until they gathered together. Community site, mixed funding, rental address, manual review, identity advisory. Imani had spent months logging those words. The office did not write race into a field. It did not need to. It wrote the life around race, neighborhood, funding, address type, employer category, documentation format, risk class. Every category could be defended alone. Together, they formed a hallway some people walked through and others were turned around inside. When bias learns to spell itself as administration, who gets believed? Graham closed the side panel before she could read more. Your file requires secondary review, he said. Please print the status screen as it appeared before you changed it. That is not available. Then print the audit history. Not available to applicants. Then write that you refuse to provide it. His mouth tightened. Ms. Vale, you are misunderstanding your role here. No. The word landed softly. I understand it. 4:03 in the afternoon. 27 minutes until the state filing window closed. Renee's phone vibrated beside her keyboard. She ignored it. Graham noticed and said, personal devices away, it is my son's school, Renee said. Later, her face changed, not dramatically. A small flinch at the corner of one eye. Then she turned the phone face down. Imani filed that away too. A person under pressure could become a witness. A person under pressure could also become another instrument of the same pressure. Both facts could be true. Graham lifted the tablet. Your academy was notified several times about documentation concerns. Dates. I do not have them in front of me. Then do not say several. He stared at her. Excuse me? If you cannot identify the notices, do not represent them as several. This office will not be cross-examined by an applicant. This applicant is asking for the basis of action. At counter 3, a young clerk stopped stamping. The sound of the lobby thinned. Even the baby near the wall had gone quiet, cheek pressed against the mother's collar. Graham lowered his voice. You may take a seat, or I can have security clear the counter. On what basis? Disruption of operations. I am speaking at normal volume. You are impeding service. You stopped the service. His eyes moved to the security guard, a broad man named Ellis who stood near the metal detector with one hand resting on his belt. Ellis did not move yet. He looked tired. He had the face of someone who had seen public anger used as proof that the public did not deserve answers. Renee whispered, Mr. Dodd, the release window is still open. Graham turned to her. Are you advising me on release authority? No. The answer came too fast. No, sir. Imani watched the price of that sir cross Renee's face. 4:06 in the afternoon. 24 minutes until the state filing window closed. Imani's phone vibrated in her coat pocket. Once, then twice. She knew the pattern because she had assigned it herself. 1 vibration for general messages, 2 for family, 3 for harbor ladder. She kept her hand on the folder and did not reach for it. The watch band pressed against her wrist. Graham continued. Southlark Care Academy has a non-standard profile, a short operating history, multiple funding sources, heavy reliance on public match, a service population with elevated compliance sensitivity. These factors require caution. The words sounded responsible. They were built to sound responsible. But Imani heard what sat beneath them. Newer organizations from poorer neighborhoods were risky. Applicants without institutional polish were risky. Communities that had been denied access were risky when they built their own access. How could a system create the shortage, punish the workaround, and still call itself careful? She asked. Are these factors written as disqualifiers? No one said disqualifier. Then why is a ready packet being held? Additional verification. What document verifies the concern? The full file. Which part? That is internal. Who can override the hold? The reviewing supervisor. Who is that? I am. Then you initiated the hold and control the review. Graham stopped. He had not meant to stand inside his own sentence so clearly. Renee's fingers hovered above the keyboard. Imani said, Please note that in the file. Graham's voice cooled. I will note applicant resistance. Resistance to what? Instruction. What instruction? To wait. For how long? As long as review requires. 4:08 in the afternoon, 22 minutes until the state filing window closed. The public screen changed again. Number 87, number 88, number 89. People rose and sat in the weary choreography of administrative rooms. The courier from the corporate clinic left with his stack stamped and tucked beneath one arm. The contractor in paint-stained boots was told his renewal would print in 4 minutes. A woman with the suburban address on her form received an apology for a system delay that lasted less than 3 minutes. Then Keisha Monroe stood. She had not been called. Not exactly. Her number had appeared, disappeared, then appeared again under a side window that nobody had staffed for 10 minutes. She looked at the screen, then at the lunchbox in her hand, then at the white envelope. She approached counter 2 with the careful walk of someone who had already decided not to sound tired. Imani noticed Graham notice her. He did not correct the empty window. He did not ask why her number had been rerouted. He looked back at Imani's file. The machine was making its next decision. 4:09 in the afternoon. 21 minutes until the state filing window closed. That was the moment where the story had opened. Your clearance is now under Enhanced Integrity Review 7, so this office will not release your approval packet today, Graham Dodd said. Now the sentence had roots. Now the room had history. Now Imani understood exactly what he had done and exactly what he expected her not to prove. She asked again for the written policy. He called it internal. She asked who entered the hold. He called it automated. She asked what cleared it. He said secondary identity review. 10 business days. The number did not merely delay her, it struck all 3 clocks at once. The professional clock would close first. Without the certification packet, the state match would slide out of reach, and Harbor Ladder would lose the one filing cycle that could keep payroll, rent, and trainee placements aligned. The public clock would follow. At New Dawn Community Hall, volunteers would already be unfolding chairs. The foundation president would arrive with the ceremonial check. The reporter from Larkhaven Civic Wire would test audio. Families would ask whether the certification had cleared. If Imani revealed her hidden role now and triggered a compliance freeze, she might still get the truth, but not the packet in time for the launch. The public promise would bend under another delay, and South Lark had heard too many promises bend. The personal clock would hurt quietly. Briar House Rehabilitation would serve dinner at 6. Her father would wear the blue tie if the aide remembered where it was. He would say he understood if she arrived late. He would mean it and be wounded anyway. Her phone vibrated again. 2 short pulses. Family. This time, the crack showed. Not in her voice, not in her posture, in her right hand. Her fingers tightened on the copper folder until the edge left a pale line across her skin. She saw Renee see that too. The message waited in her pocket while Graham lifted one hand toward security. You can take a seat until your number is recalled, he said. I have a packet marked ready for release. You had a packet marked ready. Circumstances changed. When did they change? When new information became available. What information? I just explained that the details are internal. 4:12 in the afternoon, 18 minutes until the state filing window closed. Imani did not check the phone. She imagined the screen anyway. Her father did not text often since the stroke. His messages were short because his left thumb missed letters and frustrated him. Sometimes he dictated into the phone and sent strange sentences that made them both laugh. Sometimes he only sent a question mark because selecting words took too much energy. The unread message became heavier than the folder. Graham leaned closer. We are not obligated to accelerate access because an applicant is impatient. Impatient. That word tried to make her father's birthday dinner selfish. It tried to make the trainees' rent problems irrelevant. It tried to make Keisha's envelope invisible before anyone even knew what was inside it. It tried to turn a public deadline into a personality flaw. Imani breathed once through her nose. Her father's lesson did not say never feel anger. It said keep the paper clean. So she kept her voice level. Please write down that my ready packet is being held under Enhanced Integrity Review 7, that you cannot provide the written policy, that you cannot identify the missing document, and that you entered a manual elevation at 4:01. Renee's eyes widened. Graham's hand froze. For 1 second, the office showed its machinery. Then his face closed. You are making unsupported claims from a public counter. I am reading what reflected in the glass. Silence. The access badge scanner beeped. Green. Accepted. 4:14 in the afternoon, 16 minutes until the state filing window closed. Graham turned to Renee. Log applicant as non-compliant. Renee looked at the keyboard. Her lips parted. No sound came out. She typed. The turtle charm on her badge swung once, then settled. Imani did not forgive her. Not then. Forgiveness would have been too easy and too cheap. But she understood the pressure wrapped around Renee's silence. The son's school call, the evaluation file, the supervisor code, the rent or mortgage or medical bill that made every act of courage arrive with a price tag. Understanding did not erase responsibility, it simply made the room more tragic. Imani's phone vibrated again, 2 pulses, then 3, harbor ladder, a professional message, a public message, a personal message, all waiting in the dark of her pocket. She did not answer. Outside the glass, Keisha Monroe reached counter 2 with her lunchbox in one hand and her white envelope in the other. Inside the glass, Graham Dodd looked at Imani Vale and decided she had already lost enough power to be managed. "Please step aside," he said. Imani looked down at her father's watch, 4:15 in the afternoon. 15 minutes until the state filing window closed. Then she looked back up. "No," she said, 4:16 in the afternoon, 14 minutes until the state filing window closed. Keisha Monroe did not raise her voice when the clerk at counter 2 told her the clearance letter could not be printed. She placed the white envelope flat on the counter, smoothed the bent corner with one thumb, and began again from the beginning. "I uploaded the renewal form Monday morning," she said. "I paid the processing fee. I brought the identity letter they asked for. The portal says, release at office." The clerk at counter 2 was a thin young man with red skin around his eyes and a county lanyard twisted backward against his collar. His badge said, Martin Kell. He looked new enough to fear mistakes and tired enough to make them. The screen in front of him gave his face a bluish shine. "It shows a household stability advisory," he said. "That is not what the portal said. It is what my screen says now." Keisha looked at the lunchbox hanging from her left wrist. The plastic handle had been wrapped with purple tape where it had cracked. Inside, a small ice pack pressed against 2 containers, one with chicken stew and one with cut peaches. Imani had seen enough caregivers to understand that the food might not be for Keisha. Care workers carried meals across the city in quiet little offerings nobody counted as health care until they vanished. Keisha slid the white envelope closer. "This is the notarized resident statement. This is the lease addendum. This is my agency schedule. Everything requested is in there." Martin opened the envelope only halfway. He did not remove the pages. "The advisory requires secondary confirmation. How long?" He clicked a box. "Standard review is 10 business days." Keisha stared at him. "I work tonight. I understand." "No, you do not. My client needs overnight care. Her daughter is at dialysis until 9. The agency says, if this letter is not printed today, my status goes inactive at 6. Martin looked toward Graham Dodd before answering. That was the small betrayal, not the denial, the glance. It told Imani the decision had another owner. Graham had turned just enough to listen. His face carried no curiosity, no urgency, no visible contempt, only procedure. Procedure could look very clean when it did not have to carry the body it delayed. Keisha continued, "I am not asking for anything new. I am asking for the renewal I already completed." Martin swallowed. "The system requires address integrity confirmation. Address integrity." The words slid through the room and found old companions in Imani's memory. Rental address. Mixed funding. Community site. Identity advisory. Household stability. The office kept changing the label, but the grip felt the same. Keisha tapped the envelope once. "I have lived at the same place for 3 years. The unit format does not match postal verification. Because the landlord rents rooms inside the house. You know that because I brought the letter." Martin looked at Graham again. Graham did not step in. That choice was not passive. It had weight. He heard the practical need. He heard that the documents were present. He heard that a caregiver's renewal and an elder's night care were being held by a classification that could be cleared by reading the envelope. Then he chose the comfort of the advisory over the reality in front of him. Keisha drew one breath. Her shoulders moved up, then down. She was trying not to become what the room could blame. "Can I speak to whoever can read the documents today?" Martin said. "The review team is internal. Can I get a written reason?" The printed notice will say pending secondary confirmation. That is not a reason. That is the status available. Keisha looked down. Her thumbnail had a tiny silver star painted on it, chipped at the edge. She noticed Imani looking and gave a small embarrassed smile, as if beauty had become suspicious in a room like this. "My daughter did these last night," she said quietly, not to Martin, not exactly to Imani, but to anyone who still recognized a life beyond the counter. "She has a winter concert Friday. I promised I would keep them on until then." Then she returned her eyes to the clerk. "Please check the envelope." Martin did not move. 4:17 in the afternoon, 13 minutes until the state filing window closed. The lobby held its breath in the uneven way public rooms do when one person's trouble becomes a mirror. The man in paint-stained boots looked at the floor. The grandmother with the paper bag of prescriptions clutched it tighter. The mother with the baby turned her body slightly away, not out of cruelty, but out of fear that attention might be contagious. What is the cost of witnessing when every person in the room knows the rule is being stretched, but nobody knows whether speaking will make the stretch wrap around them too? Imani felt the copper folder under her palms. Graham returned his attention to her as if Keisha's problem had been a minor weather event passing across the glass. "You're still at the counter," he said. "So is she. Ms. Monroe is being served by another clerk. She is being denied by the same mechanism." Graham tilted his head. "You are not a party to her file. I am a member of the public observing a public counter. That does not grant you authority." "Noted." Renee Park's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Her son's school call still sat face down beside the keyboard. Imani noticed the phone lighting up again with no sound, a private emergency made silent by office discipline. Renee's right hand moved toward it, then stopped when Graham's eyes shifted. Keisha heard none of that. She was still at counter 2, trying to solve the problem with papers. "Martin, please," she said. "I have the client agency line on this letter. You can call them. We do not verify by applicant supplied phone numbers. It is printed on the agency letterhead. Letterhead can be reproduced. Then call the number in your system." Martin looked at the screen, and for 1 second hope entered his face. He saw a path. Not mercy, not special treatment, a path already permitted by the rules. Then Graham said, "Counter 2, do not bypass the advisory." Martin's hope disappeared. Keisha's hand closed around the lunchbox handle so tightly the purple tape creased. 4:18 in the afternoon, 12 minutes until the state filing window closed. Imani looked at the wall clock, then at the public screen, then at the phone vibrating in her coat pocket. The 3 clocks arranged themselves inside her mind with the cruelty of clean arithmetic. The professional clock had 12 minutes. If she stayed at counter 4 and kept pushing only her own packet, there was still a narrow chance that Graham would choose procedural retreat rather than attention. He might release the site certification at 4:27, pretending the hold had been a misunderstanding. She could file with 3 minutes left. Harbor Ladder would survive the state match window. 84 trainees would keep their path. The academy might make payroll. The rent letter in the copper folder might remain only a warning, not a verdict. The public clock had 1 hour and 2 minutes. At New Dawn Community Hall, volunteers would already be unfolding chairs. The foundation president would arrive with the ceremonial check. The reporter from Larkhaven Civic Wire would test audio. Families would ask whether the certification had cleared. If Imani revealed her hidden role now and triggered a compliance freeze, she might still get the truth, but not the packet in time for the launch. The public promise would bend under another delay, and South Lark had heard too many promises bend. The personal clock had 1 hour and 52 minutes. Briar House Rehabilitation would bring her father to the small dining room at 6. If traffic held, if the bakery still had the peach pie, if her hand stopped shaking by the time she reached the car, she could still arrive close to the time she promised. If this became what it was becoming, she would miss the dinner. Otis Vale would smile at the empty chair until someone told him to start without her. The hidden project had its own clock. Imani had been gathering patterns for months. A clean audit needed patience. It needed logs, dates, comparable files, and officials making choices without knowing who was watching. If she intervened for Keisha now, she would reveal herself before the board hearing packet was complete. Graham could claim intimidation. The county could close ranks. The office could preserve less, explain more, and turn the day into a personality dispute between one angry applicant and one cautious supervisor. If she stayed silent, the record would be cleaner. That was the ugliest thought of the day. Keisha would become another data point. Mrs. Lenora Tate would lose the caregiver who knew how she liked the hallway light left on. Keisha would miss the overnight shift, and possibly the Friday concert nails her daughter had painted with such care. Martin would learn that the safest way to keep a job was not to read the envelope. Renee would learn that silence remained survivable. Graham would learn that the mechanism still worked. A data point was not a person unless someone paid the cost of saying so in time. Imani's father's watch pressed into her wrist. She remembered the municipal benefits annex, the wet cuffs of his work pants, the shoebox on the counter, the stamp-hitting paper. She remembered his hand on her shoulder when someone behind them muttered about special treatment. He had not fought every person in the room. He had made the reason leave a mark. The paper needed to leave cleaner than his anger. Imani almost chose silence. Not cowardice. Calculation. She could let the office harm Keisha, collect the denial, and win later with stronger evidence. She could tell herself the larger reform would protect more people. She could become the kind of strategist who allowed one person to drown in order to photograph the waterline. Then Keisha said, "My client cannot be left without care because your screen does not understand room rentals." The sentence did not sound dramatic. That was why it broke the calculation. 4:19 in the afternoon, 11 minutes until the state filing window closed. Imani stepped away from counter 4 and walked to counter 2. She did not explain herself. The room moved with her. Not physically. Attention moved. Eyes lifted. Conversation stopped. The badge scanner beeped behind the glass, then seemed louder because nobody spoke over it. Graham said, "Ms. Vale, return to your assigned counter." Imani stopped beside Keisha, leaving space between them so nobody could pretend she had crowded her. "Mr. Kell," she said, "please print the public reason for Ms. Monroe's advisory." Martin looked startled. "I cannot discuss another applicant, then say that in writing." Graham walked over. "This is inappropriate. Holding completed renewals under undefined advisories appears inappropriate." Appears to whom? To anyone requesting written standards. You are not authorized to intervene in another applicant's matter. Then process my pending request at counter 4 and let your clerk process hers. Graham gave a small laugh. "Not loud, not warm. You do not direct staff. No. Written policy does." His expression sharpened again. Around them, the room had become a circle without anyone admitting it. Keisha looked at Imani as if she could not decide whether to be grateful or afraid. That was fair. Imani did not want her gratitude. She wanted the envelope read. Graham turned to Martin. "Place Ms. Monroe in secondary confirmation." Martin's hand trembled above the mouse. Keisha said, "You did not check the documents." Graham replied, "The documents will be reviewed in sequence. When? Standard review applies." "That is 10 business days," Keisha said. "Correct. My client needs care tonight. That is outside the credentialing determination." The cruelty of that sentence sat in its accuracy. A credentialing office did not schedule home care shifts. It did not assign daughters to dialysis chairs. It did not pack cut peaches into cracked lunchboxes. It could pretend those consequences belonged to the world outside its counter. But who creates a cliff and then claims responsibility ends at the edge? 4:20 in the afternoon, 10 minutes until the state filing window closed. Graham raised his right hand toward Ellis at the security post. "Officer Ellis, please assist with counter disruption." Ellis straightened but did not yet move. The keys on his belt clicked once. Renee stood halfway from her chair. "Mr. Dodd," she said. Graham did not turn. "Sit down, Miss Park." Her body obeyed before her face agreed. She sat, her phone lit again. Imani looked at Graham. "On what basis is security being called? Interference with public operations." "What operation?" "Applicant processing." "You halted 2 completed processes. You are not qualified to make that assessment. Please identify who is." "The reviewing supervisor." "Who is you?" "Correct." "Then please write that the person initiating the hold is the person reviewing the hold." Graham's voice dropped. "You are creating a hostile service environment." "No, I am asking for the record." He looked toward Ellis again. "Clear her from the counter." Ellis took 3 steps forward. He did not touch Imani. His face had become more tired than stern. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I need you to step back. Under what written rule?" He looked at Graham. Graham said, "Facility conduct policy." Which section? Officer Ellis said nothing. The old woman with the prescription bag whispered, "They never know the section." A younger man near the door lifted his phone chest high. His thumb moved once. The red recording light reflected faintly in the glass before he tilted the screen downward. Imani saw Graham see it. The room changed again. Private harm had become recordable. Graham's next choice came faster because of it. 4:21 in the afternoon. 9 minutes until the state filing window closed. He walked back to counter 4, leaned over Renee's keyboard, and entered his supervisor code. Renee said, "Mr. Dodd, that will affect the Academy file. That file is already under review. It is marked release eligible. Not anymore." He clicked twice. The amber band around Imani's profile deepened to red. The word freeze appeared beside it. Manual administrative freeze. Renee's face lost color. Imani did not move. The badge scanner beeped behind the glass. "Green. Accepted," Graham announced, loud enough for the nearby rows to hear. Due to applicant interference and unresolved integrity concerns, South Lark Care Academy's packet is now under temporary administrative freeze pending supervisory review. The words struck the room in layers. South Lark, temporary, freeze, pending, review. Every word was built to sound reasonable alone. Together they closed a door on 84 trainees, 12 elder placements, $600,000 in pledged support, 1 public launch, 1 rent deadline, and the part of Imani's father's birthday she would never recover. Her phone vibrated. 3 pulses. Harbor Ladder, then 1 pulse, General, then 2, Family. The messages waited. This time she looked. The professional message was from Malik, her operations lead. State portal closes in 9. Do we file without county packet? The public message was from Mara Bell at Larkhaven Civic Wire. Families are seated early, reporter camera ready, are we still on? The personal message was from Briarhouse. Your father asked if you are bringing the blue tie. He is dressed. Imani read each one. She did not answer. Her jaw tightened once, then released. The movement was so small only Renee caught it, and Renee looked away as if the sight had accused her. 4:22 in the afternoon. 8 minutes until the state filing window closed. Graham watched Imani's silence and mistook it for impact. "You may appeal after review," he said. "When? After review? How long?" Standard windows vary. You used that phrase already. Because it remains accurate. Keisha said, "What about my client tonight?" Graham did not look at her. "Ms. Monroe, your concern is noted." "Noted where?" "In the system." "May I see it?" "No." "May I have the name of the person who noted it?" "No." "May I have the reason you will not read the envelope?" "That is enough," Graham said. Keisha flinched, then lifted her chin. "No, it is not." The room heard her this time. The young man recording raised his phone slightly higher. Another person near the wall began typing fast with both thumbs. The mother with the baby whispered into her own phone, not filming, just telling someone, "I am still here. Something is happening at credentialing." A public mechanism does not always begin as a headline. Sometimes it begins as a room deciding the same event will not live in only one memory. Renee's phone lit again. She looked at it, then at Graham, then at Imani. Her hand moved under the desk and pressed one key. A small printer beside her workstation woke with the soft mechanical whine. Graham turned. "What was that?" Renee froze. "Nothing." He walked toward her. "Show me the print queue." Her face tightened. "It is a receipt copy." "For whom?" She did not answer. Graham reached past her and canceled the print job himself. The printer stopped mid-breath. That stopped sound was worse than silence. 4:23 in the afternoon. 7 minutes until the state filing window closed. Officer Ellis stood between the counters now, still not touching anyone. His eyes moved from Imani to Graham to Keisha's envelope. He knew enough to be uncomfortable and not enough to know where the line was. Graham said, "Final warning. Step away or your profile will be marked refusal to comply." Imani asked, "Refusal to comply with what instruction?" "An instruction to cease interference." "Interference with what written process?" "You have been told." "By whom?" "By the reviewing supervisor." "Who created the freeze?" The room heard the circle close. Graham heard it too. His face hardened into something that was no longer boredom and not yet fear. He turned toward the inner staff door. Director's office now. A woman appeared from behind the frosted glass hallway. She was older than Graham, with silver-framed glasses and a tablet hugged to her chest. Her badge said, Acting Director Helena Voss. She did not look at the applicants first. She looked at Graham, then at the phones, then at the red freeze band visible on Renee's monitor. That order of attention told Imani something. Helena was not unaware of the optics. She was aware before she was curious. Graham spoke first. We have an applicant disrupting service, intervening in another file, refusing counter-instructions, and challenging internal risk determinations. Helena looked at Imani. Ms. Vale, this office cannot operate if applicants self-appoint as monitors over staff decisions. Imani asked. Is Ms. Monroe's advisory authorized for completed caregiver renewals with notarized residence clarification? Helena blinked once. I am not discussing another applicant with you. Then please answer generally. That depends on risk criteria. Where are the criteria published? They are not public in full. Can they override same-day renewal release? In some circumstances. Name one. Helena paused. Graham watched her. Renee watched both of them. Keisha stood beside Imani, still holding the lunchbox, still not rescued, still not reduced to a symbol. She was a working woman with an elder to feed, a daughter's manicure on her nails, and a shift that would disappear if a room full of people chose institutional comfort over common sense. 4:24 in the afternoon, 6 minutes until the state filing window closed. Imani's phone vibrated again. Malik, we cannot submit. Portal demands county certification upload. Mara, livestream link is active. Holding intro. Briarhouse, he says no rush, but he keeps watching the door. This time, Imani's breath caught before she could stop it, a small missed breath. Not enough for Graham to notice. Enough for her. Her father would say no rush because love often tried to make itself easier to disappoint. He would watch the door anyway because the heart did not obey the script dignity gave it. For 1 second, Imani saw two futures. In the first, she stayed within the ordinary role of applicant. The packet remained frozen. Keisha left with her envelope unread. Graham documented non-compliance. Helena issued a careful letter. The board review happened later, stronger maybe, colder maybe, after the immediate harm had already done what harm does. The system would be corrected in paragraphs while people absorbed the damage in hours. In the second, she opened the copper folder. Harbor Ladder might lose its launch. Her covert posture would end. Her father would eat peach pie without her. Graham would accuse her of staging the scene. Helena would call counsel. The county would not fall in a minute. Systems did not fall because one person had paper. They shifted because paper forced the right people to stop pretending not to see. The choice was not between sacrifice and victory. It was between which sacrifice she could live with. Imani slid the phone back into her pocket. She looked at Keisha. Do you want them to read your documents now? Keisha's eyes narrowed slightly. Not suspicion. Agency. Can they use that against me? They should not. That is not what I asked. Imani respected her more in that moment than anyone in the office. They may try. Keisha nodded once. Then yes, I want them read. Imani turned back to Helena. Please instruct your staff to preserve today's access logs before any further action. Graham gave a short laugh. Preserve for whom? Imani did not answer. Helena's face changed, only a little. But enough. 4:25 in the afternoon. 5 minutes until the state filing window closed. Graham stepped in front of Helena's uncertainty. Officer Ellis, remove Ms. Vale from the service area. Ellis said, Director? Helena did not answer quickly enough. Graham used the gap. This is a facility security matter. Ellis shifted his weight. Ma'am, I am asking you again. Imani looked at him. I understand. Then she reached for the copper folder. Graham said, do not remove documents from that folder. On what basis? Potentially disruptive materials. Paper? Unverified materials. The young man recording whispered, unverified paper, that is new. No one laughed. It would have made the fear too visible. Renee's hand moved toward her keyboard again. Graham saw it. Miss Park, step away from your station. She went still. Now, he said. Renee stood. Her chair rolled back and struck the cabinet behind her. The sound was small but violent in the quiet. Graham took her seat. He clicked through Imani's file with the confidence of someone who believed every screen behind the counter belonged more to him than to the public it governed. I am adding a behavioral risk notation, he said. Imani asked, does behavioral risk affect site certification? It affects release suitability. Where is release suitability defined? Internal, who reviews behavioral risk? Supervisor chain, which begins with you. For now, 4:26 in the afternoon. 4 minutes until the state filing window closed. The public screen still called numbers as if nothing extraordinary had happened. 91, 92, 93. The blue digits moved forward while justice stood still. Graham typed. Renee looked at the screen and whispered, "Mr. Dodd, that note is not accurate." Every head behind the glass turned. The sentence had cost her something before it even finished. Graham stopped typing. "Repeat that." Renee's voice nearly disappeared. "She did not refuse service at intake." Graham stared. Renee swallowed. The file was release ready when opened. The freeze was manual. Helena looked at Graham. Graham said, "Ms. Park is under stress." Renee's phone lit again on the desk. This time she did not look down. Imani saw her shaking hands. Repair could begin as something inadequate and still be real. It did not erase the earlier silence. It did not make Renee brave from the start. It made the next sentence possible. Renee said, "I saw the green status." Graham rose from her chair. "You are relieved from counter duty." Her mouth closed. That was the price arriving. 4:27 in the afternoon. 3 minutes until the state filing window closed. Imani's professional clock was nearly gone. The public clock was already bleeding into live stream. The personal clock had folded itself around the image of her father watching the door. Graham turned to Helena. "We need county counsel." Helena said, "Call them." Graham picked up the desk phone and pressed a line. "This is Deputy Director Dodd at Central Intake. We have an applicant attempting to interfere with risk controls and claiming implied review authority. We have a recording situation in the lobby. I am placing all related packets under temporary hold until counsel advises." All related packets. The phrase moved through Imani like cold water. Not just her, not just Keisha. Every self-LART trainee packet in the county queue. Every pending placement tied to the academy. Every applicant whose name had entered the system through the pipeline she built. Graham had taken one woman at a counter and expanded punishment into a category. That was the pattern revealing itself without being asked. When a gatekeeper cannot defeat a person directly, why does the category around that person suddenly become dangerous? Imani pulled the copper folder fully toward her. Helena said, "Ms. Vale, I strongly advise you not to escalate this further." Imani looked at her. "I asked for ordinary service." Graham covered the phone receiver. "You created a scene." "No," she said. She opened the folder. The lobby went quiet enough for the paper to sound loud. Inside, the first page sat beneath a clear cover. Cream stock, state seal, blue signature, reference line, time-stamped acceptance, the board delegation letter she had not touched all afternoon. Beside it was the sealed access audit summary, marked confidential until triggered by obstruction or retaliatory classification. Beneath that sat the notice of conditional authority, limited, specific, and useless for ego, but sharp enough for this moment. 4:28 in the afternoon. 2 minutes until the state filing window closed. Imani placed her father's watch hand flat beside the folder, as if keeping one part of herself anchored before the room changed. Graham lowered the phone. Helena stopped breathing for half a second. Renee stood behind her chair with tears in her eyes and no permission to wipe them. Keisha held the white envelope against her chest, not saved yet, but no longer alone in the mechanism. The badge scanner beeped one more time. Green. Accepted. Imani slid one document free. She turned it face down on the counter first. No speech, no reveal yet. Only the sound of paper meeting glass. The document landed face down. For one breath, nobody spoke. Then Imani turned it over. The state seal faced the glass first. Cream paper. Blue signature. A narrow red filing stamp in the upper corner. Graham Dodd's hand was still on the phone, but his fingers no longer looked certain. Helena Voss leaned forward just enough for her glasses to catch the overhead light. Renee Park stood behind her chair, one hand pressed against the backrest as if the furniture had become the only thing holding her upright. Imani did not raise her voice. "This letter is dated March 16th, she said, "filed at 9:32 in the morning. Reference Marlow State Care Board Delegation Alpha 14-7. Issuing authority, the Marlow State Care Board. Assigned examiner, Imani Vale." Graham's eyes moved across the page. Once, then again, his face did not fall apart. Men like Graham did not give rooms that kind of satisfaction. His expression tightened into review. That was worse for him. He was trying to read himself out of what was already written. Imani continued. The appointment is limited. It does not allow me to approve my own application. It does not allow me to fire county staff. It does not let me override state eligibility standards. It does allow me to inspect access records, preserve audit trails, and trigger emergency board review if a county office uses unpublished access criteria to delay or release eligible packet. The badge scanner beeped behind them. Green. Accepted. The sound that had meant authority all afternoon now sounded like evidence. 4:28 in the afternoon, 2 minutes until the state filing window closed. Graham covered the phone receiver. This office was not notified of your authority. Helena did not look away from the letter. Imani slid the second page from the folder and placed it beside the first. Notice of conditional authority was transmitted to County Council on March 17 at 8:46 in the morning, she said. Receipt acknowledged at 9:03. The examiner's identity remained confidential under the board's controlled access provision until obstruction, retaliation, or unauthorized classification occurred. Graham said, "That is not how this works." Imani looked at him. "Then show me the rule." No one moved. That was the room's first reversal. Not because Graham had been defeated, not yet. A paper did not dismantle an office. A seal did not erase months of delay. But the question he had used all afternoon, the question applicants never had enough power to ask and make matter, had returned to him with state authority attached. Show me the rule. Helena reached for the document. Imani did not hand it to her. I can show it through the glass, she said. I will not surrender the original. Helena nodded slowly. Graham said, she cannot use an applicant visit as an examination. I requested ordinary service, Imani said. I requested a written policy. I requested a missing document. I requested a printed reason. I requested that your clerk read Ms. Monroe's envelope. She paused. Every escalation after that was yours. Keisha Monroe looked down at the white envelope in her hands. Her shoulders had risen so high they nearly touched her jaw. She lowered them deliberately, 1 inch at a time, as if refusing to let fear decide the shape of her body. Graham turned to Helena. Director, this is a procedural ambush. Imani opened the copper folder wider. No, she said. This is a preservation trigger. The words settled coldly. Helena's mouth tightened. She understood them. Graham understood them too, but he rejected them with the speed of a man who had built safety out of denial. You staged this, he said. I made an appointment. You concealed a state role. The board concealed an examiner because prior complaints alleged staff behavior changed when oversight was announced. That is speculative. Imani placed the third document on the counter. This is not. The audit summary was thinner than the delegation letter, but it changed the room more. It was marked confidential until triggered by obstruction or retaliatory classification. The mark no longer protected the office. It protected the record. Imani read only what the room needed. Access Pattern Review. Dated July 2nd. Prepared for the Marlow State Care Board. Review period, 7 months. Subject Office, Marlow County Credentialing, Central Intake and Remote Release Queue. Graham's eyes flicked toward the staff hallway. Imani noticed. So did Renee. So did Helena. The pattern review examined 618 completed caregiver renewal, training site, and community care access packets, Imani said. 179 were placed into manual review after reaching release eligible status. Applicants from 3 South Lark and East Barrow service districts were moved to manual review at nearly 4 times the rate of comparable applicants from the western districts. The lobby made a small sound, not a gasp, something lower. Recognition moving from one body to another. Imani continued. Release eligible packets tied to rental addresses averaged 9.4 business days before final clearance. Corporate affiliate packets averaged 1.2 business days. Enhanced Integrity Review. 7 appeared in 31 files. The board found no public rule authorizing its use for completed site certifications or caregiver renewals. Graham said, risk categories require discretion. Discretion requires boundaries. She turned a page. Of those 31 files, 27 involved community providers, home care workers, or training sites serving minority neighborhoods. 21 already had the requested documents uploaded before the hold. 16 were manually elevated within 15 minutes of applicant arrival. 9 were elevated under your supervisor code. Silence. This silence was different from the silence before. Earlier, people had been protecting themselves from power. Now they were watching power discover it had been writing its own confession. When an office calls a pattern discretion, does the harm become less real because the form looks clean? Graham put the receiver down without ending the call. A faint voice from county counsel kept speaking into the open line, distant and tinny. He said, "The data lacks operational context." "I agree," Imani said. That answer struck harder than refusal. She looked at Helena. "That is why this is not a conclusion letter. It is a trigger report. The board's full review begins with preserved logs, staff interviews, file sampling, and applicant notice. Due process applies to the office too." Helena's face shifted at that. Not relief, not gratitude. Calculation, but no longer Graham's calculation. Imani turned to Renee. "Ms. Park, please print the access history for my file, the status screen showing release eligible when opened, the manual elevation entry, the administrative freeze entry, and the counter 2Q log for Ms. Monroe. Print only what the system shows. Initial nothing you cannot verify." Renee stared at her. The request did not forgive her. It did not shame her. It gave her one clean thing to do in a room where she had already failed to do several. Graham said, "Ms. Park, do not touch that station." Helena spoke before Renee could move. "Print it." Graham turned. "Director." "Print it," Helena said again. Renee sat down. Her hands shook so badly she missed the first key. She stopped, took one breath, then typed. The printer woke with a mechanical whine that sounded almost alive. 4:29 in the afternoon. 1 minute until the state filing window closed. Imani's phone vibrated. "Malik, still open. Need upload key now." The professional clock had narrowed to a thread. Helena looked at the screen over Renee's shoulder. Her voice was quiet. "Was South Lark release eligible before the manual elevation?" Renee did not look at Graham. "Yes." "Was the certification packet complete?" "Yes." "Was there a missing document?" "No." Helena asked, "Was the freeze based on a written deficiency?" Renee swallowed. "Not on the screen." Graham said, "She is not qualified to interpret release authority." Imani said, "Then you interpret it. Show the deficiency." Graham said nothing. The printer produced the first sheet, then the second, then the third. Each page came out warm and ordinary, as if it did not understand the damage it carried. Helena pointed to Renee's monitor. "Restore the packet to its status before the unauthorized freeze. Release under the pre-existing completion mark. Note that final board review is pending and that this release does not waive investigation." Renee looked at Imani. Imani did not nod. This was not her favor to grant. Renee clicked. The red band disappeared. Amber flashed once, then green returned. On the screen, the certification upload key appeared. Imani photographed it and sent it to Malik with one line. "File now." The room waited. 4:29 in the afternoon, less than 1 minute until the state filing window closed. Keisha whispered, "Please." It was not clear who she was speaking to. The clerk, the screen, the whole afternoon. Imani's phone vibrated. "Malik. Filed. Confirmation accepted." 31 seconds remained. The professional clock did not save itself cleanly. It survived like a person pulled from water, coughing and furious. But it survived. Imani read the message once. Then again. Her hand tightened around the phone, then relaxed. No smile, no victory line, only breath. Graham saw the green screen and the printed audit pages and still tried to return the room to procedure. "This entire release is contaminated by examiner conflict." Imani looked at him. "The release was approved before I identified myself." The sentence closed around him. He turned to Helena. "I acted within caution." Helena replied, "Caution does not explain a manual freeze after policy questions." It was the first sentence all afternoon that sounded like leadership, not courage yet. Courage would require what came next. Helena picked up the desk phone and ended the dangling counsel call. Then she dialed again, slower this time. "This is Acting Director Voss. I am initiating emergency preservation under Board Delegation Alpha 14-7. Suspend use of Enhanced Integrity Review. 7 for release eligible caregiver and community site packets until council and the state board review scope. Place Deputy Director Dodd off live release authority pending administrative review. Graham's face went still. Off live release authority did not mean fired. It did not mean ruined. It meant he could not touch the gate while the gate was being investigated. It was a due process consequence, small enough to be lawful and large enough to matter. He said, "Helena, not director, Helena." She did not look at him. "You will document your rationale in writing," she said. He almost laughed. Then he saw the phones. The young man near the door was still recording. The mother with the baby had stopped whispering and now held her phone in both hands, not filming, just listening to someone on the other end. The contractor in paint-stained boots stared openly at the screen behind the glass. The grandmother with the prescription bag said, loud enough for the first row to hear, "They finally found the section." Nobody laughed. They were too tired for comedy. Imani turned to counter 2. Ms. Monroe asked for her documents to be read. Helena looked at Martin Kell. "Read them." Martin opened the white envelope fully for the first time. Paper slid against paper. Not dramatic, just a lease addendum, a notarized residence statement, an agency schedule, and a contact record that had been sitting there all along, waiting for someone to believe enough in reality to look. Martin's face reddened. "The agency number is already in the system," he said. "Call it." He called. He confirmed the residence statement through the agency record, not the applicant's supplied letterhead. He verified the client assignment. He checked the renewal fee. He compared the notarized name to the identity document. Every action took seconds. Every second made the earlier 10 business days look less like caution and more like refusal wearing a tie. 4:32 in the afternoon. The state filing window had closed. Keisha stood still while the printer at counter 2 began to move, one page, then another. Martin stamped the renewal letter and slid it through the slot. "Cleared active through next cycle," he said. Keisha did not take it immediately. She looked at him, then at Graham, then at Imani. "I need the copy for my agency too." Martin printed the copy. That was her agency. Not gratitude, not a rescue speech, a worker remembering exactly what the system still owed her. She took both pages and called the agency from the lobby. "This is Keisha Monroe. I am active. Send me to Mrs. Tate tonight. Tell her daughter I am coming. And tell my baby I am keeping the nails until Friday." Her voice broke only on the last word. Then she turned away before anyone could make her tears public property. The room after power changes hands is never clean. Some staff stared at their screens as if screens could protect them from memory. One clerk quietly reopened a pending queue. Another reached for a stack of files and then stopped, suddenly unsure which ordinary actions had been ordinary and which had only been habit. Officer Ellis stepped back to the security post, his hands no longer near his belt. He looked at Imani once and gave the smallest nod. It was not enough to make him brave retroactively. It was only enough to show that he knew touching her would have been wrong. Renee gathered the printed audit pages. She placed them in order. Release status, manual elevation, freeze entry, behavioral note, Q log. She initialed the pages that matched her screen and wrote one sentence on the final page. Initial status was green when applicant file opened. Her pen stopped halfway through the signature. She looked up at Graham. "I cannot undo. Not saying it sooner," she said. Imani answered, "Then do not make this about being forgiven." Renee flinched. Then she signed. That was better than comfort. The young man recording lowered his phone. The red light disappeared, but the fact of it remained. A few minutes later, Mara Bell's name appeared on Imani's screen. Community Hall stream is live. People heard certification cleared. Reporter asking about board notice. The public mechanism had become real, not gossip, not spectacle. A community that had gathered for a launch had just watched the difference between a promise dying off screen and a document making the door open. The story would not stay inside the lobby. It would move through a live stream, then a civic article, then a board agenda, then the hands of people who had spent years being told their delays were isolated. Graham looked at the phones, the printed pages, the green release screen, and the acting director who would no longer take his summary as fact. His silence finally arrived. Not disciplined silence, cornered silence. There was a difference. Imani gathered the documents one by one. Delegation letter, conditional authority notice, Audit summary. Printed access logs. She placed them into the copper folder with the same care her father had once used when aligning papers on a municipal counter. The folder had entered the room as protection. Now it felt heavier, not because it held victory, because it held proof of what victory had required. Her phone vibrated again. Briar House. She almost let it go. Then she answered. A nurse spoke gently. "Ms. Vale, your father says he's not worried. He asked if the blue tie looks straight." Imani closed her eyes. For the first time that afternoon, the room blurred, only for a second. "Tell him it looks perfect," she said. A pause. "He wants to know if you are still coming." Imani looked at the wall clock. 4:37. The state filing window had closed. The public launch was still waiting. The personal clock had not stopped just because the professional one survived. She looked at the copper folder. Then at Keisha holding her renewal letter. Then at Renee standing beside the printer with her signed page. Then at Graham, no longer at the counter, no longer controlling the gate, but not gone from the system yet. Imani picked up her bag. "I am on my way," she said. She ended the call before her voice could ask permission to break. Helena stepped toward her. "Ms. Vale, the board will need a formal statement." "It has one," Imani said. "Today is the timestamp." Then she walked toward the revolving door. The badge scanner beeped behind her one more time as a staff member crossed into the inner hallway. Green. Accepted. This time, nobody in the lobby mistook the sound for fairness. Outside the glass, Keisha moved toward the exit with her lunchbox in one hand and the renewal letter in the other. Renee returned to her station without being told and printed the next pending file in the queue. Graham stood beside Helena with his hands empty. The public screen called another number in blue. The office continued. That was the honest part. Power had changed hands for one afternoon, but the building did not collapse. The counters did not vanish. The forms did not apologize. The people still waiting still needed service from the same institution that had just been forced to see itself. Imani stepped into the revolving door and pressed one hand against the copper folder to keep it from shifting. For one turn of the glass, she saw her reflection layered over the lobby behind her. A black woman in a plum coat. A folder full of authority. A watch cracked at the band. A room full of people who now knew the word internal could be challenged. Then the door released her into the evening. 3 months later, Renee Park sat in the same Marlow County credentialing lobby before sunrise, not behind the glass, but in the second row of plastic chairs with a witness packet on her lap and no badge around her neck. The badge had been placed in a sealed envelope after the first week of review. Not taken forever. Not ceremonially stripped. Due process did not work like theater. It worked through notice letters, interviews, access logs, temporary restrictions, and the quiet dread of waiting for people in rooms to decide what your silence had helped protect. Renee had not been fired. That mattered and did not absolve her. She had been removed from live release duty for 28 days, then returned under supervised access after completing 40 hours of documentation ethics training and 3 follow-up interviews with the board's external monitor. The promotion she had been expecting disappeared. Her annual evaluation used the phrase, "delayed corrective action," and she read it 6 times at her kitchen table while her son did homework beside a bowl of cereal he had chosen for dinner because she had forgotten to cook. The cost did not make her heroic. It made the repair real enough to hurt. On the morning of the board hearing, she arrived carrying the printed access history she had preserved, the Q log she had copied under instruction, and a handwritten statement she had rewritten 13 times. The final version did not ask for sympathy. It did not describe Graham Dodd as the only problem. It said she had seen release-eligible files moved into manual review after applicants asked for written reasons. It said she had heard the phrase non-standard profile used as if it were a fact instead of a judgment. It said she had stayed quiet because she was afraid of losing income, insurance, and schedule stability for her son. Then it said fear explained her silence but did not excuse it. That sentence was the one she almost removed. She kept it. When she stepped out of the hearing room, she found Imani Vale standing near a vending machine that hummed too loudly against the wall. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Renee looked thinner than she had in the lobby, not because she had suffered most, but because she could no longer hide behind the motion of work. "I did not tell the truth soon enough," Renee said. "No," Imani answered. Renee nodded as if the word had landed where it needed to. Then Imani added, "But you told it under oath." That was all she gave her. It was not forgiveness, it was a record. Graham Dodd's review lasted 63 days. The county gave him notice of allegations, access to counsel, a chance to respond, and 2 formal interviews. He used the first interview to describe himself as cautious. He used a second to describe himself as targeted. He said enhanced integrity review. 7 was not bias, it was a protective screen for public funds. He said community training sites presented unusual exposure. He said rental addresses created verification uncertainty. He said staff had misunderstood his instructions. He said Imani Vale had engineered a confrontation designed to embarrass the office. The evidence answered more patiently than any person could. The logs showed that Graham's supervisor code had manually elevated 9 release-eligible packets in the 7 months before the lobby incident. 6 involved South Lark or East Barrow addresses. 5 had already passed document review. 4 were elevated within 20 minutes of applicant arrival. 3 included notes about applicant tone after the applicant requested written policy. None included a missing document. Enhanced integrity review. 7 appeared in 31 files. No public rule authorized it for completed caregiver renewals. No county handbook defined it as a release block. No state board guidance permitted it to override certification once the required documents were complete. The phrase had existed in a draft memo about high-risk vendor fraud reviews, meant for large corporate contractors with unresolved billing discrepancies. Graham had taken that draft language and applied it downward toward small providers, home care workers, neighborhood training sites, and people whose paperwork looked less polished because their lives had been forced to fit inside systems that were not built for them. He had not invented every unfair outcome. That was one of the hearing's hardest truths. He had simply used a biased shape that already existed and made it sharper. At the end of the review, Graham was removed from release authority, demoted from deputy director, and placed on a 2-year restriction from supervisory control over applicant access decisions. The county did not announce ruin, it announced accountability. His name stayed out of the first public summary, then appeared only in the board minutes after the final administrative order became public. He appealed one portion of the finding and lost. He kept employment in a non-public records role while the county considered whether further discipline was warranted. Some people online called that too soft. Imani did not. She knew revenge fantasy wanted the door to slam so hard the building shook. Real accountability often looked less satisfying and more durable. Graham lost the power he had used to make other people wait without reason. That was not everything. But it was not nothing. Keisha Monroe never became a symbol, no matter how hard the first comments under the live stream tried to make her one. She kept working. That was the part she cared about. Her renewal stayed active. Mrs. Lenora Tate did not miss overnight care again that month. Keisha's agency added a backup verification letter to her employee file, and the county issued a corrective notice confirming that room rental resident statements could not be rejected without reviewing submitted documents. Keisha printed that notice and placed it in a plastic sleeve in her work bag, right beside the lunchbox with the purple tape on the handle. Her daughter's winter concert happened on a Friday night in a school cafeteria with folding chairs, squealing microphones, and paper snowflakes taped to cinder block walls. Keisha kept the chipped silver star polish until after the concert, just as she had promised. In the third row, she recorded 3 songs, 2 of them blurry because she cried through the first verse and laughed at herself afterward. When a local reporter asked if she felt grateful to Imani, Keisha corrected her. "I am glad she spoke," she said, "but I brought the documents. I asked them to read them. Do not erase that part." The quote became the line people repeated most, not because it was soft, because it refused to make dignity dependent on rescue. Inside Marlow County credentialing, the changes arrived with numbers nobody could turn into a single dramatic scene. In 3 months, the office reviewed 179 manual review files. 42 were cleared without any additional applicant action. 26 received apology letters for unexplained delay. 11 were referred for deeper compliance review because the original files contained inconsistent staff notes. The average wait time for release-eligible caregiver renewals fell from 9.4 business days to 2.1. Community training site certifications that had been sitting longer than 30 days were reduced from 18 to 4. Staff completed 680 total hours of retraining on written reasons, public rule access, and document sufficiency. The county published 7 revised policy pages in plain language and removed 4 internal labels from live applicant screens. The board scheduled 12 months of quarterly monitoring and required a public dashboard updated every 30 days. The numbers did not heal everyone. They did prove the delays had not been inevitable. The community hall livestream from New Dawn did not explode overnight. It moved the way local truth often moves. First through 40 families who had been sitting in folding chairs waiting for a launch. Then through group chats. Then through a short article by Mara Bell at Larkhaven Civic Wire. Then through a regional public radio segment about administrative access. After 2 weeks, the clip of Keisha saying, "Do not erase that part," had been viewed 86,000 times across reposts. After 1 month, 2 neighboring counties announced reviews of their own manual hold categories. Nobody called it a revolution. That would have been too easy. It was a pressure crack. Pressure cracks matter because they show where the wall is weakest. Harbor Ladder survived the state match window by 31 seconds. The foundation released the first $600,000. The state match followed after a delayed but successful review. South Lark Care Academy kept its lease, though only after Imani negotiated a payment plan that stretched over 6 months and cost her the last of the reserve she had promised herself she would not touch. 84 trainees entered the first expanded cohort. 68 completed the first certification cycle. 52 accepted placements within the first quarter. 12 elder care agencies signed partnership agreements. 4 trainees who had previously been stuck in credentialing delays became peer navigators for the next class. At the launch, Imani was not there for the opening applause. Malik handled the microphone. He stood under the fluorescent lights with a wrinkled agenda, one shaking hand, and a smile so tense that people later told him it looked like courage. He told the room the certification had cleared. He did not tell them the whole story yet. He only said the door opened, and the room made a sound that was not celebration exactly. It was relief finally allowed to make noise. Imani arrived late. She went to Briar House first. Her father was still wearing the blue tie, though one side sat lower than the other. The peach pie was cold by then. Dinner trays had been cleared from most of the tables. He had saved the chair across from him anyway. When she entered, he looked at her for a long second before smiling. "You handled your business, baby," he said. She almost said yes. Instead, she sat down, adjusted the tie, and told him she was sorry. Otis Vale looked at her with the tired patience of a man who had once aligned papers on a public counter because anger alone could not carry proof out of a room. "Did the paper leave clean?" he asked. Imani's throat closed. "Clean enough," she said. "It was not the whole truth. The paper had left with fingerprints, fear, recordings, delays, and people hurt before anyone acted. It had left cleaner than silence. It had not left clean." 3 months later, the father's watch sat in a small dish beside Imani's bed whenever she slept. The leather band was still cracked. She had not repaired it. She told herself that was because the watch kept time better than most new things. The truth was simpler. The crack reminded her that survival and damage could share the same object. The copper folder stayed in her office now, locked in the second drawer beneath the updated Harbor Ladder roster. She did not carry it every day. She hated that part of her missed its weight. Hidden authority could become a kind of armor, and armor could become a habit. She had to keep choosing not to mistake protection for identity. The access badge scanner in the credentialing lobby was still there. It still beeped when staff crossed into the inner hallway. But now, beside the public counter, a printed sign stated that release-eligible applicants had the right to request the written basis for any manual hold. The sign was plain, black text on white paper, laminated crookedly. It was not beautiful. It did not undo the waiting rooms, lost shifts, missed medication windows, delayed launches, or the way people learned to lower their voices before asking for what the rules already owed them. But people read it. Some pointed to it. That mattered. A victory happened in Marlow County. Say that clearly. A caregiver kept her shift. A training academy kept its funding. A gatekeeper lost the authority he had misused. A clerk told the truth at a cost. A county office had to publish rules it once hid behind the word internal. A public record now existed where before there had only been individual confusion, private shame, and applicants wondering whether they were imagining the pattern. That is what changed. But here is the part that refuses to become comfortable. Amani Vale won because she had documents in a copper folder. She had a board delegation letter, she had an audit summary. She had a reference number, a timestamp notice, a legal trigger, and enough institutional language to make the institution answer her in its own tongue. She had power in a room designed to treat her as if she had none. Most people do not walk in with that. Most people walk in with a lunchbox, a white envelope, a bus transfer, a child waiting after school, an elder waiting for dinner, a boss counting minutes, a phone about to die. In one tired sentence they have already repeated too many times. I uploaded the form, I brought the letter, I paid the fee, I was told it was ready, I need this today. How many people face the same wall without a board behind them, without an audit, already written, without a camera turned on, without a journalist waiting, without a side character willing to break silence? Without a father who taught them how to make paper carry what anger could not? How many are told the policy is internal and have no way to make that answer become evidence? The revenge in this story is satisfying because the reversal is real. The room changed, the screen changed, the file changed. The person who misused discretion lost control of the gate. But the deeper question remains after the catharsis fades. A fair system cannot depend on the hidden power of the person being harmed. It cannot require every applicant to arrive with a secret appointment, a sealed audit, or the perfect words under pressure. Fairness must be ordinary enough to protect the person who is tired, alone, late, scared, and still telling the truth. Amani did not burn the institution down. She made it write down what it had done. Sometimes that is the beginning of justice. Sometimes it is only the first clean page. At Revenge Dimension, we tell fictional stories about power, dignity, and the systems people are forced to survive. We do not soften the emotion, and we do not pretend the ending fixes everything. If this story made you feel something, question something, or recognize something you have seen before, share your thoughts below, hit like, and subscribe for the next story. Because the conversation does not end with the reveal, it begins with what we do after it. This is a fictional story inspired by real systemic issues documented in public research. All characters, institutions, locations, and events are entirely invented. Any resemblance to real persons or organizations is coincidental.